What is your end game in a game like Star Citizen? We all might take some time mining, salvaging material, looting locations for valuables, or stealing somebody else's goods. And maybe you just enjoy some racing or touring the verse, or the explorer who's finding those resources for others. But one of the longest running end game goals for many different games across various genres is making a home. And for a long time, that's been barely even a topic when it comes to Star Citizen. But it's undoubtable at this point that base building will be a major part of CitizenCon this year, and along with crafting, a focus of the game post 4.0. Finally, along with an economy, this could be the rhyme and reason many fans of the project have been waiting for to make the game make sense. Today we'll take a look at the basics of base building and how even other players choosing this path could fit into your own game loop of choice. Thank you for coming to my Tomato Talk. Do you make a habit of cracking rocks in Star Citizen? Do you look around for anything other than a couple of different elements when working? The game loop is arguably the most filled out in the game, with components and subcomponents, hand-placeable gadgets, single and multi-crew ship options, ground vehicles, and FPS opportunities with multiple options as to what elements you're taking home. But most mining enthusiasts don't even recommend the gameplay that often. How about you, cargo haulers? You've got 324 finally making the profession more interesting after over half a decade of waiting, but missions are still just text on a screen, and your own commodity trading isn't really driven by anything with purpose. Engineers should start to get opportunities to give power and resource management a try in 4.0, but for as complex as ships are, there's something quite special about trying to figure out the balance around running a whole ground operation, like in something like Satisfactory. I could keep going on, but I think you probably get the point. Star Citizen is really lacking a purpose for a lot of the things we're doing in the game. And while we generally look at the economic simulation, Quantum, or Star Sim as the saving grace for that problem, I think base building and crafting are the real endgame solutions this game needs. Obviously, missions and contracts are enough for many players, but the sandbox aspect of this game really needs some more drive to keep people interested long term. Even the aspects of exploration and data running will rely heavily on base building. Resource deposits will be a major part of building infrastructure across the game, encouraging players and groups alike to plop down extractors, refineries, and drills to obtain the most valuable resources and store them or ship them off for sale. These locations will need to be regularly updated on the global map database so that players can buy the info from space stations and shops, or at least recorded to be sold off or shared with other player groups. This concept was shared during the discussion around base building in 2017.
Criteria, as well as the seller's insight into that information, which we collectively refer to as knowledge. One of the things that we track for each section of land that you can potentially purchase is the resources present and the quantity. If the land has an abundance of a particular mineral that at that particular point in time is exceptionally valuable, then that's going to increase the current value of that land. Knowing that there is a vast abundance of gold at a particular area, but the information is stale, it's 2 weeks old, it's a month old, it's 6 weeks old, as it gets more out of date, it becomes less and less valuable. And so what this means is that players will routinely have to refresh the knowledge of a particular area in order to maintain the perceived land value within the game.
And the design behind downloading these maps was further teased at CitizenCon just last year.
It's much more interesting if we can actually take this on the go. So let's download it to our databank. As you'll notice, we now have the representation of the environment in the upper left corner of our visor. Now, the thing that's really interesting to note at this point is you may encounter rundown settlements, or you might come across a cave that no one else has ever set foot on before. What will happen in this instance is your radar will incrementally update your map, and it will incrementally reveal your environment and save that to your databank. So this map, what we see in the upper left corner of our visor, is not really just a map. what it really is actually data. It's our radar.
This system could rely on data losing value and even degrading in accuracy if resource deposits regularly shift over time when not exploited. While this is speculation based on the past talks of CIG, it would be a great source of low-risk, starter-level exploration missions, which require the surveying of planets and moons in whatever system you're in. Finally, the various player-made structures in the game would add into the economic network that provides people across different groups with more places to go for actual reasons. Whether it is to store and ship goods, stop off for supplies and fuel, or maybe even set a new respawn location. Even the actual construction of these bases are going to take a lot of resources that players will have to buy, mine, or salvage on their own. With only so many outposts and points of interest that could be made for this game by the devs, player content could help to bring the vast planets and moons in Star Citizen more life. While players can get an apartment in the city, a hab on a space station, or just live off of their own ship, building your base can be a lot more fulfilling, and who likes being near people anyways? The game loops in Star Citizen can provide engaging gameplay for those interested in them. But currently, we're missing the motivation to dig deeper into those game loops outside of just making the most money and buying more ships. This obviously makes people focus more on ships as a level of progression rather than the actual gameplay, the reputation, or the location you're getting to that builds more of the game. From exploration to mining to simply just building a place to live, base building offers a great catalyst to get things moving. But how far is Star Citizen looking to go when it comes to player bases? Different games offer a different focus when it comes to base building. Satisfactory is all about efficiency and function, given that's the whole point of the game. Fallout 76 focuses in large part on social spaces and just a general presence. Valheim and No Man's Sky both hit a mid-ground and generally push you towards base building as an end goal for many. Star Citizen seems to lean towards the latter, but as I've described in the first chapter, it's focused heavily on function, efficiency, and purpose. Your base in Star Citizen will consist of a few different types of facilities. You've got your general purpose buildings like ship landing pads, garages for vehicles, freight elevators to store and summon commodities and supplies, and storefronts, where you'll supposedly be able to sell and buy goods, a perk we most commonly associate with the Banu Merchantman and the Drake Kraken Privateer. You've got to have somewhere to sell those valuables you discover. And these are mainly your outward-facing facilities that could see visitors and goods passing through. Then you'll have your extractors, your mining drills and pumps that pull the planet's resources into your own collection. This is one of the most interesting parts of base building because it relies on the principle of resource deposits in the ground like you might see in Starfield. The way these deposits function and shift could have huge impacts on how this whole game works. It'll also be interesting to see how we can finally get the ability to mine these resources with ships like the old Prospector concept art used to show. With all these different buildings comes the groundkeeper's dream: power management and the associated facilities. We've actually seen hints of these all around the newer points of interest in the game: power lines, windmills, and solar panels. But these obviously aren't what will be included in the system that we're going to use to put our bases together. For that, we'll be able to take advantage of different generators and batteries, which can be charged and discharged based on your power needs. This is visible in the upcoming engineering profession in ships coming with 4.0, and will likely require quite a bit more effort for the more complex bases that we build. But it'll be equally interesting to see how power needs decide where players plant their roots, as wind power, solar power, and likely geothermal power will push you to certain parts of a planet for the best returns. And of course, repair is going to be a big part of these, as you do need to maintain these facilities and keep them up to proper working condition. This again factors into the engineer's gameplay. Now, base defenses. Likely an anxiety-inducing part of this process for players in a game where you can already lose all your loot in the blink of an eye. The good news is you have choices. Fully protected locations in proximity to UEE territory mean your base is essentially invulnerable. You'll never have to worry about losing your things, as hardcore impenetrable defenses and quick spawn AI defenses will keep it safe. This means you'll have to pay higher taxes for upkeep and won't have access to the great resources though, as you're settling down in basically the suburbs of the UEE, relatively speaking. Low security locations may be a system like Nyx, the third star system we'll be seeing, where the UEE isn't active, but there are some factions that will look out for you to try and keep the peace. With some upkeep and taxation still required for the player, it will be less safe but still defended, and being closer to the frontier means more valuable resource deposits will be available to you. Finally, the absolutely most remote locations will give you no security, leaving your base up to the whims of whatever defenses you set up and maintain. This means you're free of the evil big man and able to keep everything you exploit. No taxes, but your base will be very vulnerable. These bases will likely be very small-time operations that can stay under the radar, or org-based facilities that can be monitored around the clock. And while we assume this is all based on a star system basis, it is possible that a system like Pyro might give you low security closer to factions and no security further out away from where they have control. We still have to wait and hear more about that later. Ultimately though, there are a lot of questions that linger around this part of base building. We just don't know about how server meshing and the different shards we'll be on and the defenses involved will work, but we'll likely hear more about that at CitizenCon this year. Oh, also, maybe we'll hear more about the possibility of you being able to build these bases in space as well, as player-owned space stations or maybe asteroid bases are a concept that they've talked about, but haven't necessarily been confirmed yet. From the process of choosing your location by surveying the planet to building out buildings through fabrication and manufacturing using any tier of the vehicles that will give you access to different sized buildings, on to decorating your interior with furnishings and trophies you've brought home, and finally defining a reason for your base with additional buildings, this comes off as an incredibly applied and varied option for gameplay. And with crafting relying on blueprints that can be physically traded and used for additional manufacturing for any item in the game, from ammo to ships, this whole segment of the game feels like the ideal endgame goal for the sandbox players in Star Citizen. With server meshing finally entering the game in 4.0, we see the introduction of a long-term goal that was laid out all the way back in 2016. With that, base building naturally makes sense as the next major milestone to shoot for in order to hype players and define some sort of direction for the game. Missions and contracts are always an option, but base building and crafting will likely be a major focus going forward as an end goal for many players. Thank you for watching this Tomato Talk. You recently told me in a survey on the channel you wanted to hear more about where base building was going. And while I'll have a lot more to say about it, I hope this was a decent early preview for you to set your expectations for CitizenCon this year. If you're interested in more of this, consider subscribing to the channel. If you're looking for an org to join in building bases, running trade, manufacturing, and resource gathering operations, you can join the org by going to gii.app or hitting the link in the video description. And if you'd like to support us making these videos, podcasts, and streams every week, you can become a Patreon member or YouTube channel member and get exclusive monthly videos, live podcast access, and your referral code in our randomizer below every video. I hope you learned something new in this video, and I'll catch you in the next.